Good morning and welcome to our Monday, March 14th, 2022, 9 o'clock strategic planning meeting. Let the record reflect that we have Commissioner Cuney and Commissioner Kearns here. Commissioner French is away and we're hoping that he will be joining us here in a little bit. We have our executive management team and we are joined initially by Chad Coles for 2 briefings. So Chad, I will let you take it away. See if you turn on your video. There we go. There he is.
Good morning, commissioners. I think we have a PowerPoint that we can bring up that would orient us a little bit on the 2 topics. Thank you, Ron. So the first topic is an extension of the agreement with Central Valley School District. If you could go to the second slide. Earlier, we executed an agreement that covered from the roundabout. This is on the, I'm sorry, I need to orient you a little bit. This is out in the valley on the north side of the, I think it's on the north side of the river, near the intersection of Mission and the roundabout. And I can't come up with the name of that right now, but hopefully that you guys can orient yourself on that. This is the old railroad right-of-way we have in that area that we've given up chunks of before. This extension of the agreement, earlier the school district, Central Valley School District, entered an agreement with us to extend a trail from the roundabout to the eastern edge or western edge of their property. I'm sorry, to the blue area outlined where it says amendment. So that's the next property over. This amendment actually was going to be an amendment, and it turns out that our attorneys would rather have us execute a brand new agreement that includes this extension. The extension would reach to the western edge of the Hub Sports Center. Again, the same reason for the construction of a trail, construction and maintenance of the trail. Any questions?
No, I'll just comment. We thought we had executed an agreement with Central Valley School District when Selkirk Middle School was built there to allow them to use that right away. I know the parcel in between the hub and Central Valley, the middle school has now been purchased and is going to be part of the Hub Sports Center. And so I know that in talking with the school district and the hub, it's a great addition to be able to extend that, to have it as kind of an emergency access. If there's anything that happens at the middle school, that then they can quickly get down to the Hub Sports Center as a secondary location. Again, it's just a license agreement with them. They know that, if we want it back at some point, it's still ours. And I think it helps perfect our right on that too. Chad, if I'm not mistaken.
It could have that benefit in case of damage. And it also helps us in that they're taking over the maintenance of that right of way, so we don't have to do weed control, we don't have to remove trash, that kind of thing.
Okay, thank you. I guess that's what the additional information that I knew on it, so I just wanted to provide that. Otherwise, cool. You can go on to the next one.
All right, this will be on the agenda, I believe this week. I will double check and make sure that. But for the next item, next slide, please. Lewis Graff is here to describe an extension project that the City of Valley would like to have.
Yeah, thanks, Chad. We could go to the next slide. I believe the next slide's a map. So this is on the north side of the river, east of Barker, and there's about 650 feet there between the dead end of the sewer there on the east end of Buckeye. That would this project would extend it to the Spokane Valley city limits, and they are using ARP money for the construction of this, and the county has already done the we used Burrell Engineering. They did the design, and specs for the project, and so it's more or less ready to go out to bid, other than the Valley is still working on reviewing the final bid package before it goes out on the street. But I believe it's scheduled to go out to add this week. So there are 3 unsewered parcels on the south side next to the river, and then one larger. There's actually 2 parcels on the north side, 2 9-acre undeveloped parcels on the north side. Can we go to maybe the 3rd screen, please? That's got some of the other main bullet points on it. And again, this is ARP money, so it would be the construction and the construction management and bidding and inspection would all be taken care of through the city of Spokane Valley with their ARP funds. So anybody have any questions on that?
Mr. Kearns, any questions? So seeing this, so we're contributing $40,000. I'm assuming we haven't talked about that as part of our ARP funding. So is that just happening through our sewer fund?
Correct, yes.
And then the rest of it's coming out of the city of Spokane Valley. And is this a priority for us? I guess I'm just, where it is on our list and their list, it must be a priority for the city of Spokane Valley. Is that correct?
Yeah, it's I'm not sure where it is on their priority list. A few months ago when we were looking at different projects to partner with the Valley, this is really the one that seemed to gain any traction a few months ago, and it is in our 6-year CIP plan to do this project. So
okay, great. Okay, thank you.
And thank you, commissioners. That's all we have this morning.
Okay. Well, you just were very timely in your presentations, so we appreciate that. We will just stay on schedule then. Thank you very much. Thank you, Louis, for joining us today. Okay, so we are going to be just a little bit ahead of schedule. So next on our agenda is Jeff McMorris and I think Arian Schmidt to talk about ARP planning and give us an update.
Yes, thank you, Commissioner. First thing I wanted to do is talk about timelines. What we've learned in the past week since the board passed the first round of categories, and as we've been talking about, we have to put these all out in a RFP. The county puts out the RFPs on Wednesdays, and they have to be open for 3 weeks. And that's statute. And we've looked for ways to expedite, and it just appears this 3 week is a requirement. What we are going to recommend to the board, we don't need a vote. We just kind of need head nods that we're moving in the right direction on your behalf. We are going to suggest that before we put out general ARPs with most of the categories, that we get a software on board, a system that would help monitor kind of cradle to grave, end to end, the whole ARP process, help with applications through monitoring. One thing we've learned, generally the county is the grantee, and there are things we do when we receive funds. Congress made the county the grantor in this particular venue with ARP. And that's just kind of a different system than grantee. The information we need to gather, the way we monitor and use these funds as the grantor versus the grantee. We have learned, Gary has forwarded some stuff over the last few months. Erica's done some looking last week. Arian was also doing some looking. So we do believe there's some software systems out there that would help us put this together. One thing I do want to mention, our goal would be to post the RFP for a software system this Wednesday. It would have to be open until April 6th. Then you have board action the next week. If you have at least a week just to get the system up and going, might take longer. We wouldn't be able to post our first category AR or RFPs until April 20th, which would close on May 11th, 3 weeks later. So bottom line, we're not going to be making any actual allocations of ARP funds outside of maybe purchasing a software package until mid to end of May. So kind of want to put that time frame around it. And then with that, Arian has a graphic she's made, and she'll kind of talk through the system we're proposing and how we see the software benefiting the county.
Good morning, commissioners. Nice to be with you today. Thank you, Ron. So this is a draft concept picture that is independent of who is selected from the RFP process for the application portal firm, and is meant to just walk you through it as we go about going from allocation priorities into the actual awarding of recipients. So this picture shows that right now Spokane County has an ideas portal, and that is an informal collection of requests for consideration for funding that is primarily meant to educate Spokane County commissioners on what's out there. As you did last week, the Spokane County commissioners determine what funding allocation categories they want to proceed with for each round of RFP funding. Once that is done and the selection of that ARP allocation portal firm is in place, everything that happens within this next box is what would be happening within who we select as the firm. It's meant to be a standalone end-to-end system that will really encapsulate all of our ARP activities for a number of reasons that Jeff talked about, so that this primarily unique aspect that the county has for ARP really remains separate. And at the end of the ARP time period, we have a very concise and comprehensive export of what we did for review and potential audit purposes. So once we select the portal, this will be an online subscription. That's one of our requirements. That would then be followed by unique requests for proposals by category with eligibility requirements that would go out, and then individual firms or organizations could reply with. Once those are received, the status inside the portal would be marked as received. That would trigger the next level, which would be review level 1, for which Spokane County would determine if, in addition to the software requirement eligibilities, is this request for proposal response indeed eligible to proceed to the next level. Once that is determined, Spokane County staff will have a small group that will do review level 2. And as an output of that review level 2, there will be a short list, anywhere between 3 and 5 firms, depending on how many are received. That short list would then be prepared for the county commissioners to review and discuss, and if necessary, return for additional clarifications by category from the responses. If the commissioners are ready to proceed, they may go to the last category of status, and that is approved, and that would be inside consent agenda. Once a firm is approved, they now move into the subrecipient status, for which this solution would monitor, remind the subrecipients of reporting requirements, and also continue to give us ongoing risk assessments of those subrecipients. And once the reports are completed, they would also produce an output report that we can use to trigger the reimbursement payments, which is the method that ARP follows, to those subrecipients. You'll notice that that payment component does happen outside the portal, because we will need the budget office and our accounts payable systems to then be involved. The last component, although it's a very large component that would happen outside this portal, is all of the preparation work and reports done for us as the grantor would be prepared, but then the grants staff would then do the actual filing with the federal government for our requirements. So this is a very high level draft picture of how we will proceed for the next year to 4 years on the allocation and awarding of ARP solicitation responses. Any questions?
Commissioner Kearns, do you have any questions?
No.
Okay, I guess, so a couple that I have is, as we look at the review process, I apologize, thinking through other things. Beyond county staff, do we have community people on that?
So absolutely, and I can rephrase that, maybe Spokane County internal review. This would be an ongoing committee, most likely comprised of myself, Jeff McMorris, county legal, possibly, or the grant staff. And then, yes, we absolutely can have an individual outside the county or a pool of folks, depending on the categories, that could rotate in and assess on that internal review. So I'm happy to make that word change, because you're absolutely right. It's the component of staff review that would prepare the short list for you.
Because I guess it was just a thought that, on different things, having someone who understands the different areas that would be, the RFPs would be for, that, would not be part of those requests, would be, helpful, I think, with staff to have a community person, and I think shows that we're, using, that knowledge from the community as well as it comes, before it comes forward.
Absolutely. I will make that adjustment in the text so it's a little clearer.
Okay, and then the other thing on the process, I just know we've got some, potentially some RFPs that we may want to get out sooner than our software, since our software is going to take so long. So I think that we just want to be flexible. I don't think we don't want to get too much out, but I just want to know that we've got the flexibility that if we need to, we can do that. Just because by the time we go through that whole process, we get, almost into summer, late summer, if there's other things that we know, I think one of the thoughts, like on nonprofits, if we're going to be so far out, and not that this would be one, but I'm just concerned that, it's going to give us the opportunity as RFPs come back to us from these individuals, groups, to know what the needs are out there. So I just want to, have us be able to think through, and it just, with the software being so far, I'm, can think of a couple of that we may want to get out sooner. So I just want to make sure we can still be flexible on the front end, knowing that we can still get it into the system as that system comes up.
I think it's all possible. Once again, the system will take what we enter, and backdating things that were of interest prior to that, we will confirm as we move forward with the procurement requirements that is indeed allowable for us. Once again, because of ARP desires, we were unable to, sole source or fast track that. So I absolutely do think we can quote unquote backfill on that, just because we are a little ahead of this particular portal in other areas. So we'll make sure that will be confirmed as we go forward.
Because we're still going to be making sure that it fits all the legal criteria and all of that. So I don't want it to seem that it's just a software. It's just a software that's accumulating this. So I just want to make sure that we can be flexible and hopefully get it in place though as soon as possible. I mean, I completely agree with that, to get it in place as soon as possible.
Absolutely.
And we are working on RFPs for each category at the same time, and we'll be bringing those before the board. So if the board says we want to move quicker on a particular one, that's certainly an option. Like Arian said, we can go back after the fact and plug it into this system, because the system is really the repository of information. It's not a requirement of ARP. We just believe it would be a good way to get going as we get up and going, but we don't have to wait for it.
And Commissioner, one thing that you brought up that I think is good for awareness, once we release the RFPs by category, those also fall under Spokane County procurement requirements. And each of those RFPs will also need a 3-week for solicitation. So to your point, that kind of stretches things out even more. So just wanted that to come up for awareness.
Great. Thank you.
Bottom line, is the board good with us posting this Wednesday, so in 2 days, for a software management program that would help monitor ARP.
Yes, I think, go ahead, Josh, I'm sorry.
I was just gonna say, yeah, I'm fine with that.
Yeah, I think I'll be fine with that too. I did reach out to Eric Johnson over the weekend, the executive director for WASAC, just to see if he's heard of, what other programs people are using and that. And he actually hasn't heard of a lot yet, but he was going to check with his counterparts across the nation and get back to me too. So hopefully we'll have that information before Wednesday. But I mean, they'll all be probably competing with the RFP. So it'll just be, more information than we have.
Perfect. That's all we have for ARP today.
Awesome. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, and I see we have been joined by Mike Burgess. So he is next up. We're a little ahead of schedule, but if Mike's ready, then we'll go ahead and move on.
Yes, Commissioners, happy to go early.
Awesome.
So thought I'd just kind of touch base with you and update you on some of the bills that we talked about over the last few weeks and kind of what happened at the end. You do know we adjourned last Thursday night, around midnight, which is pretty normal. It wasn't they didn't go past midnight. That's happened before, but what I would call pretty normal sine die. There was one interesting thing of note that I'll talk about that has a county impact a little bit further down that list. But on balance, I didn't feel like session was any busier than any others. I think they're all about the same. The remote nature had its challenges. In some ways made things easier too, though, after having been through that for 2 years. I would say by the end of session, there were a lot more legislators in town, not necessarily gathering on the floor, but were around after hours and things like that. So much like I guess probably the rest of the world, the legislature is opening itself up too. Would expect next year we're back in person, but obviously those are similar decisions that you all are dealing with as well. Biggest takeaways from session, I would say at the end of the day, the transportation revenue package is probably the biggest thing they did. There's always, issue areas here and there, but that was by far kind of the biggest thing that they do. The budget is obviously always big, but they have to do that every year anyway. They don't have to do a new transportation revenue package. So having that in the mix was kind of at the end of the day, the most dominant takeaway for me in terms of an issue. Just jumping into these bills, 1918, that was the reducing emissions from the outdoor power equipment. You'll remember that bill was first had a lot of mandates, requirements in it. It then was altered to make it an incentive laden bill. Ultimately, though, that bill did not pass, failed to make it out of the Senate Ways and Means Committee in time. Second one there, the GMA effective date, that's essentially the vesting bill. I think I told you last week it had passed, but just wanted to reaffirm that did go to the governor. I would expect him to sign that bill. The economic tax deferral bill 5901 was assumed in both budgets, assumed in the Senate budget to begin with, but was agreed to in the House. So that bill is passed, will become law. The leasing DOT property has already been signed by the governor. It was signed last week. So that's there. One of the ones that you're going to have to deal with in the future is 1799. That's the organics legislation. It did pass. There were some changes made to it. I don't want to say that weakened it, but that made it a little bit more workable for counties. But at the end of the day, you are going to have to deal with citing organic facilities as part of your comp plan updates. And then also at the end of the day, it's going to have an impact on your ratepayers as costs associated with implementing this bill will increase the cost to ratepayers. Well, I guess that's my prediction, but it's done that in other states, California notably, looking towards the future there. The one that was interesting, kind of the most political theater, was 1099. And this is the Growth Management Act climate bill. And we didn't talk about this bill that much this year. We talked about it a lot last year. And it was alive, made it out of the House and then made it through the Senate. Then was one of the last bills being considered, that in a bill dealing with a new student loan program in Washington State, were kind of the last 2 or 3 policy bills being discussed or having energy put into them. 1099 got interesting because it became a conference committee report. And if you're not familiar with those, that happens when the House and Senate can't agree on a bill. They send it to what they call conference. A conference committee report is produced, and then it gets an up or down vote. It is not something that can be amended. That's the way they usually do the budgets and some of the more complicated bills. What was interesting about this bill is when the conference committee report posted, it had a couple, 3 new sections in it that dealt with the middle housing issue and the opportunity for local governments to get a carve out of the REIT if they made certain zoning decisions. And that was verbiage that was from another bill. The language, I think, was almost verbatim from another bill. And you'll remember there were a couple other bills dealing with middle housing that we loosely talked about this year. They were a little bit more impactful for cities than they were for counties. But anyway, the Republicans challenged the scope and object of that bill, which is a procedural challenge to make sure that the subject matter of the bill title stays. Lieutenant Governor gave an interesting ruling. Frankly, I mean, pretty much bluntly said that he didn't like his own ruling or was uncomfortable with it. Didn't like it, but that this REIT tax issue to incentivize more dense housing did fit within the scope and object of the bill. But the net effect of that was it delayed things enough to where the bill came up late enough in the process that once the Senate did pass it, it went back over to the House and essentially they ran out of time. There's been some rhetoric in the news about a lot of floor speeches would have slowed the bill down. I don't know what's true or not in terms of that, but an interesting bill that had some county impacts to it that ultimately did end up dying, even though it had an agreed to conference committee report. On the police reform side, you remember last week I'd mentioned that there were 2 bills, one dealing with the use of some of the military equipment and the use of force when you're implementing certain protection orders and things like that. Those 2 had already been signed by the governor. Another use of force bill that clarifies, that was a bill that was supported by law enforcement, has also made its way to the governor. I don't think it's been signed yet. But the one that was left off the table and did not pass was the one dealing with vehicular pursuits. Interesting that bill did not make it, but the Senate did not concur in House amendments, thus killing that bill. Something that the legislature, I assume, will look at dealing with in the future. But that issue remains unsolved going forward. And you'll remember a month ago, or boy, probably 6-8 weeks ago almost now, when Sheriff Knezovich joined one of our meetings, that was one of the bills that he had a major concern, or that issue had a major concern with, but ultimately the legislature did not deal with that this time around. On the transportation revenue package, remember there are a handful of local projects in that nothing changed on that project list. So there's the BRT line in Spokane, the transload facility out at the airport, and there's a couple of pedestrian bridges. Additionally, though, I think it is fair to say that there are dollars in that bill for maintenance and preservation that will impact roads in the region. Those aren't specified yet, but there's dollars there for DOT to work with. But on the funding side, you remember that there was the proposal to do the out-of-state fuel tax. Essentially, that fell by the wayside. And then we had a discussion one day, a couple weeks ago, about the use of the Public Works Trust Fund dollars to backfill that revenue loss. Then I think last week I said they had shifted to the MOTCA dollars, the Model Toxic Control Account dollars that go to kind of hazardous waste cleanups and some other things. And there's actually some other county benefits to MOTCA funds. Well, they ended up going back to the Public Works Trust Fund dollars. They did not the original proposal, I think, was 150 million a year, 100 million a year. They ended up doing 57. And then they did, to backfill the rest of the money that was lost from the out-of-state fuel tax going away, they used additional general fund dollars. So ended up with Public Works Trust Fund and additional general fund dollars. The Public Works Trust Fund level, though, was not as high as originally proposed. So that's kind of how they closed the loop on all the funding. Operating budget side.
So Mike, before you go on transportation, so
Sure.
because some of it was that basically the counties, there wasn't any money going to local governments.
Mhm.
Did I hear right that, I mean, they did put like 80 million
Yeah.
into like CRAB, FMSIP and TIB, which is really not
You
much.
heard, yes, Commissioner, you heard correctly, and thank you for bringing that up. I'd started to gloss over it, so I appreciate you bringing it. But yes, there was additional dollars there when compared to what the starting point was. Certainly, there was an add, but I don't think high enough. I think counties would have liked to have seen more. I guess I'll put it that way.
Yeah, because I think when you take $80 million across the state for cities and counties, I mean that's not much to put into CRAB and TIB for it. So
sure.
So it seemed like it was kind of a token thought, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, you can use your word. So, on the operating budget side, remember, I mean, big budget, overall a 24% increase from the previous biennium, which is on orders of magnitude pretty large. They increased spending increased in this supplemental budget. The increase in spending was about $5 billion, which is pretty considerable based on the past, the way budgets have done, especially supplemental budgets. So, the net effect of that is there weren't a lot of cuts. There are a lot of portions of that budget that help assist counties on the criminal justice side and any number of other areas where we're not going to see reductions that, obviously in the future, I don't think the economy is going to be going as good, and maybe we're seeing some signs of that now for whatever reason. But at this point, though, there weren't drastic cuts in the budget to local governments and the dollars that flow there. And then on the capital side, there's a list of projects here. If you can see those, these aren't new. This is basically the list I gave you, about 3 weeks ago, a month ago, when the House and Senate original list had come out. Some of these projects were not in both budgets. Some were in just the House or just the Senate, but ultimately they all stayed in. And then I added in a couple other ones that have Spokane ties to them. I'm not familiar with the St. Agnes Haven or the early learning at Logan Elementary, but as I did a word search of Spokane through the budget, those two popped up. So there's dollars into the community, and then the list there, a handful of these we supported in our own legislative agenda. And so that was good to see those dollars spent. That the one note there, that Fairchild base protection language, that money did stay in there. So there's some money there to deal with that issue. And then just going forward, I'm going to take some time and go through our legislative agenda and then write some notes underneath all of our subject areas. So you kind of get a review of what happened in the areas that we prioritized. It'll be similar to some of these things I've already talked about, the postmortem on some of this, but just expect to see that from me in the next week or so. And then, from a timeline standpoint, we'll take a rest for a bit, or I will for a bit, and then we'll start looking at 2023 at some point here in the late spring, summer. Happy to answer any questions if you've got it, if you have any, and I guess I can leave it at that.
Thank you. I'll see if Commissioner Kearns has any questions first.
No, it was a wild session. Thanks for all your hard work, and thanks for keeping us in the loop and letting us know, when something popped up, giving us the heads up to keep an eye on it. So thank you.
For sure, Commissioner. Thank you.
Yeah, no, I just say thank you. I know it's been kind of a crazy couple of sessions with being virtual and not and all of that. Hopefully next year we'll be a little more back to normal. But thank you for all you've done. And I think we've got Ozzy coming later this morning, so I may have him speak to the pursuit bill, because I definitely was following that right at the end.
Yeah.
How it's like, going back and forth, and then, several amendments in the Senate and then finally didn't pass, which I think is going to be hard for our deputies.
Sure. No, absolutely. It's between that one and then just the raw politics, someone that does what I do for a living, observing that, and then what happened with that the GMA climate bill was just pretty interesting, the way things played out that last day.
Yeah. So thank you for, watching out and being our eyes and ears over there. So we really appreciate it.
Okay, as always, you can get a hold of me anytime and I'll be in touch, but I won't see you next Tuesday or for a few Tuesdays after for sure. So.
Very good. Enjoy your
All
well-deserved.
right. Thanks, commissioners. Have a good day. Bye. Bye, everybody.
So next on our agenda is kind of a couple of miscellaneous items that we can take care of. There's a couple of proclamations that have come in that we just need to give head nods to at this point in time. One is for the National Public Health Week. And so I think that is it's the week of April 4th through 10th. So I think if we've got two head nods to move it forward, so that way we can do that the last week of March and have it ready for them for that week. Okay, seeing two head nods, we'll be good to go. And then the next one, Josh, I think you're bringing this one forward, so I'll let you speak to it.
Yeah, we were contacted by Lance from EWU. It is their 140th birthday celebrate of the institution. So they would like us to pass a proclamation recognizing April 4th as Giving Joy Day in honor of Eastern Washington University's 140th birthday and the institution's contribution to our region.
Very good. So do we want to do that the week ahead as well, just so that way it's done and they have it?
I think that's probably the best way to do it. That way we can just transmit the proclamation, the past proclamation back to them and signed. And if they have any type of events or celebrations scheduled, they'll have the copy there. They can do with what they'd like.
Okay, great. So then we would like to have both these proclamations for the March 29th meeting, 2 o'clock consent agenda.
Sounds good.
Sounds good. We've got two head nods on that. So we'll have those ready if, we've got our copies. So if there's any questions or, changes, edits, we just need to get them into Gina here, in the next week or so. Perfect. Well, I know, let's see, any other miscellaneous items? Scott, I'll look to you.
I don't have anything else this morning, Commissioner.
Okay, I will just speak to on Friday, Kathleen and Justin and I from Community Services joined, the mayor did a meeting on mental health task force that we were invited to. And so we did that. I made sure that we talked about what we here at Spokane County are doing. So Justin did a good job. She was primarily focused on youth. So like I said, made sure that we got Kathleen and Justin involved so that way hopefully in the next one, we can actually do a full presentation to that group to show all the things that our community services are doing for our community as it relates to mental health issues. So as we are the BHASO, and so a lot of that flows through Spokane County. So I just want to make sure that people were aware. That was like our first notice of it. So I think it's always great when people want to bring people together for a conversation, but I just want to make sure that people understand that Spokane County is kind of on the forefront and really working hard to help the youth in our community. So I think we'll see if the sheriff's here, and if he is, then we can move forward. But otherwise, we may take just a few minute break if there's nothing else. Oh, Scott has raised his hand, sorry.
Thanks, Commissioner. I just want to put a plug in. We've been looking and recruiting for an executive director for the Northeast Public Development Association. That is a joint PDA between the city and the county. So if anyone knows of good candidates who might be interested in that role, they can go out and look at the information for the job description and more details on the Make It Spokane website for the PDA. And the board would very much appreciate getting a number of candidates in there who think they're a good fit for the position.
Thank you.
I guess I can ask my weekly question. Jared, any update on the hearing room?
No, nothing since last week, Commissioner.
Okay. We can always hope. One of these weeks that answer is going to change.
Yeah.
Let's see. Well, then we may just take, I would say, let's just do a 5-minute break. And we will wait, since we're ahead of schedule, we'll wait for the sheriff to arrive, and then we'll ask him a couple questions. And I think his is an executive session, but I do want to ask him a couple questions on, how the legislature ended up for law enforcement. So as we start, so I'll do that. So we'll take a 5-minute break. We'll be back at, well, it's 9:43. Let's say we'll be back at 9:50. Making an even number. Thank you. Okay, welcome back. It is 9:50. Sheriff Ozzie Knezovich has joined us today. So with that, we just had our legislative update from Mike Burgess, and a couple of the items on our legislative list were police reform legislation. And we do know that there was a couple of bills that did pass, but there was one that didn't. And so I just wanted to give the sheriff the opportunity to speak to the legislation and how he felt the legislature and the legislation went for this year.
On the two bills that passed, they did improve some aspects. They actually defined some of the key elements of the use of force and things like that. So things got slightly better in that realm. However, 5919 Senate Bill 5919 did not pass. And we worked on that bill right up until the final hours, actually minutes. I contacted Senator Billick by phone, left a message by text, and received no contact back from the senator whatsoever. I've been told that it was up to the senator if that bill got put on the floor, and the bill did not get put on the floor. The bill for Senate Bill 5919 was the pursuit bill. So we are still stuck with the 2021 state law concerning pursuits, which is really causing a lot of problems in the state of Washington. The criminals know the law, and they know that they don't have to stop. And under the current law, unless we have probable cause for a violent crime, and a lot of people have this misunderstanding what violent crimes are, because we think that some crimes that are violent crimes, well, according to law, they're not. As in threats to kill your spouse. It's not a violent crime. All right. Assault on a police officer, which is a felony, is not a violent crime. So during a traffic stop, somebody could punch a police officer and get in their car and drive away, and we cannot pursue them. And so violent crimes, kidnapping, DUI, we can pursue if we have probable cause or reasonable suspicion on the DUI side, because you don't have probable cause until you actually stop somebody. But that's the only reasons we can pursue in the state of Washington. What does that mean for our community? Well, it meant already that hundreds of thousands of dollars worth of damage out in the valley due to, I believe it was 13 burglaries. And we saw the individual, we watched them get into a vehicle, and we could not pursue them. They drove away. And everybody wants to sometimes say that burglaries aren't violent crimes. Well, how do you explain to victims of violent crime that they weren't violent? Because we allowed somebody out of jail in Spokane County multiple times, arrested, put in jail, arrested, put in jail. Well, they went over to Idaho just recently and shot a 77-year-old homeowner and killed him during a burglary. Several years ago, we arrested a group of burglars up on the north side of our county. When we made contact with them, one of them was armed. The detective asked, "Why are you armed?" Well, it's for the homeowner. So please tell me that burglaries are nonviolent. We have really created a situation where these laws that were passed last year and now continuing with this pursuit are basically Independence Day for criminals. There's no more accountability whatsoever, no more ability to hold people accountable. And I really question, Senator Billy last year made this big public production about how he always talks with law enforcement and everything about these bills. Well, this is one bill that we did talk to prior to session. And this is a bill that we asked him to make sure gets fixed. And then he doesn't even bother the last night of being able to do this to return phone calls. And to this day, he's never returned my phone call. So I really question just how much input law enforcement has in these things. I can tell you that it was none. You can't say that we have input and not call us back. I'm sure that, Waspic had contact with the senator and the FOP, because Senator always mentions FOP, the Fraternal Order of Police, as being one of the biggest supporters of these bills. Here's the reality. The FOP is just a group, an organization that sells stuff to law enforcement officers. They are not representatives, nor do they represent law enforcement in the state. They're just an organization. When the CEOs, the chiefs and the sheriffs of the state go, "This is really bad," you'd think that would carry some impact and some weight. Well, not with these legislators. It does not. And, again, the senator made these big sweeping statements last year when they passed these laws that we had input. Well, based on my experience this year, when we did try to get a hold and ask, to this day, I still have not received that phone call.
Well, and I guess when you were in the conference room a couple of weeks ago, or maybe it was just last week, and you showed us the video on the drive-by shootings that you can't pursue unless the officer actually sees it or the deputy actually sees it. Is that correct?
Yeah, because at that point, if we catch that, if we see the vehicle matching that description 2 blocks away, we don't have probable cause to pursue that vehicle. That's what the horrible part about this is. If they would have changed it to go back to reasonable suspicion, we could have pursued that. But I don't have probable cause. That's just a car that looks like a car. In order for me to catch that car and pull it over and take a look and go, "Oh yeah, there are bullet holes in it," and identify the people in it, we don't have probable cause. So that's one of the dangers of this type of legislation. And let's face it, the legislature bought into the mindset that has been fed to them that all law enforcement does is show up and kill people. that is the mantra that they have used to pass these type of bills. And that's why I highlight certain activists, because they testified in these bills. They testified towards that mantra, that they have to prevent law enforcement from contacting people because all we do is kill them. That's the narrative of the testimony by the activist that, you know, some people are upset that I highlighted in a video. That's what they testified to. And they also put pressure on legislators that if they don't vote that way, they're all racist. So they throw labels. But bottom line, this legislation, this particular bill, 5919, it was Senator Billig that had the power to put that on the floor, and we had the votes to pass it. We did. We knew we had the votes to pass it. All it had to do is hit the floor.
Thank you. Like I said, we had our briefing from Mike Burgess, and this was one of the things that came up. So we just wanted to, since you were here, give you the opportunity to speak to it. So appreciate that. I am going to check if there's any other miscellaneous items, because I think we will be able to go into executive session. See, Mark, I'm going to have, or Ashley, is Ashley on? I'm not seeing.
Commissioner Ashley Cameron is on.
She is.
Yes.
Oh, we'll get her promoted.
Yeah.
It's Tony.
Because I just want to make sure that she can speak to the purpose of executive session, or if you want to. And then I think we have 30 minutes scheduled. And I will just double check that are there any other miscellaneous items before we go into executive session? Because I think barring that, then we will be done for the day, and we will reconvene tomorrow at 2 o'clock for our 2 o'clock consent agenda. And Scott, were you gonna?
There's Ashley right there. And I don't
Okay.
have anything else, Commissioner.
Okay, so with nothing else then for miscellaneous or that is on our agenda for today, we will go into executive session. And once we come out of executive session, we will convene for the day and be rejoined tomorrow at 2 o'clock for our 2 o'clock consent agenda. In the executive session will be Commissioner Kearns, myself, our executive management team, Mark McLean as our civil attorney. And Ashley, I will let you speak to the purpose of the executive session and how long.
So yeah, we'll take like 20 minutes and it's to discuss the performance of a public employee.
Okay. So it is now 10:02. It'll take us probably just a couple of minutes to get into executive session. So I will say we will start executive session at 10:04. And we will be in for 20 minutes. If we extend, I will let our clerk know, and she will note that for the record. But again, we will conclude at the end of that and reconvene tomorrow at 2 o'clock. Thank you all very much.